7 exercises that naturally boost your testosterone the most. You already know that men over 30 start going through a hormonal decline. But that does not mean you have to just sit back and accept it. And no, I am not talking about injecting synthetic hormones into your body. There are specific movements that, when done the right way, stimulate your body to produce more testosterone naturally. Obviously, they do not deliver miraculous results like an injection would, but they also do not destroy your health or threaten your longevity the way an injection does. Science has already proven it. Certain movements trigger a much stronger hormonal response than others. That is why today you will see the 7 exercises that most naturally boost your testosterone, backed by science. Add them to your training consistently and watch the difference. Exercise number 1, hip thrust. If there is one exercise that is underestimated by people who have been training for decades, it is this one. The hip thrust is one of the most recommended movements for activating the gluteus maximus, which, as a fun fact that most people do not know, is the largest muscle in the human body. Even so, most men train this muscle only indirectly as a supporting player in other exercises. That comes at a cost after 40, because weak glutes overload the lower back and compromise pelvic stabilization in virtually every movement of daily life. The main muscle groups recruited are the gluteus maximus as the prime mover, the hamstrings as a synergist, and the spinal erectors and core acting as stabilizers throughout the entire movement. To perform it correctly, rest your upper back on a bench, keep your feet flat on the floor at hip width, and place the barbell over your hip area with the help of a protective pad. Drive your hips upward until you reach full extension, squeezing the glutes hard at the top of the movement, then lower in a controlled manner without letting your hips drop suddenly. An extra tip that makes a real difference is holding an isometric pause of 1 to 2 seconds at the highest point of the movement, intensifying glute muscle recruitment. The most common mistake is compensating with excessive lower back hyperextension instead of finishing the movement with the glutes, which takes tension away from the target muscle. Another slip is positioning your feet too far from your body, reducing the useful range of motion. For this exercise, 3 sets of 8 to 12 repetitions are recommended, prioritizing the contraction at the top rather than execution speed. Contraindications apply to those with an acute lumbar disc herniation, undiagnosed hip joint pain, or a recent history of femoroacetabular impingement syndrome without prior medical clearance. Exercise number 2, overhead press. The shoulder is one of the most complex joints in the body, which is why it needs balance among its 3 portions: anterior, lateral, and posterior. The overhead press simultaneously recruits the anterior deltoid, the lateral deltoid, the triceps, and a good amount of core stabilization, since the movement demands control of the entire torso while the load travels above your head. It is worth noting that those who neglect the rear portion of the shoulder by focusing only on front development tend to accumulate postural imbalances that show up precisely between 40 and 55, when decades of poor posture come due. That is why this exercise should go hand in hand with posterior shoulder work in your complete routine. To perform it correctly, start with the bar resting at clavicle height, elbows slightly in front of the body, and press the load vertically until your arms are fully extended, without hyperextending your lower back during the movement. Lower in a controlled manner back to the starting position. A valuable extra tip is to squeeze your glutes and brace your core throughout the entire movement, creating a stability base that protects your spine. Something especially relevant for those who already feel their lower back more sensitive after years of training or a sedentary routine in the past. A common mistake is arching the lower back excessively to compensate for lack of shoulder mobility, and another is using a leg drive to help push the bar up, which takes away from the integrity of the exercise. It is also common to not brace the core before starting, which reduces the force applied and increases the risk of lower back compensation. 3 sets of 6 to 8 repetitions are recommended, since this is a more demanding exercise in terms of joint stability. Contraindications include active rotator cuff injuries, shoulder impingement syndrome, and cervical disc herniation, cases where the movement should be replaced with reduced range of motion variations or reviewed with a professional before being added to the routine. Exercise number 3, bent over row. A common mistake is thinking that only the bench press and overhead press build a strong torso, forgetting the upper posterior chain. The bent over row fills that gap. Working the latissimus dorsi, the rhomboids, and the mid-trapezius, muscles that are essential both for aesthetics and for the upright posture that tends to deteriorate with years of sedentary desk work. To perform it, hinge at the hips, keeping your spine in a neutral position, and pull the bar toward your abdomen, squeezing your shoulder blades together at the end of the movement before lowering in a controlled manner. The full range of motion here is what separates an efficient exercise from a shallow movement that only tires out the forearms. The beauty of this exercise lies in its ability to work the back while demanding constant isometric contraction from the spinal erectors to keep the torso stable. An extra tip that improves muscle recruitment is to think about pulling your elbows back rather than simply flexing your arms, directing the effort toward your back instead of your biceps. The most frequent mistakes are rounding the lower back during the pull and using body momentum to help lift the bar, which removes useful tension from the target muscle. Incomplete range of motion is also common among those who prioritize load over proper execution. 3 sets of 8 to 12 repetitions are recommended, with strict control of the eccentric phase on the way down. Contraindications apply to those with a diagnosed lumbar disc herniation, acute shoulder injuries, or uninvestigated lower back pain. Cases where the single-arm dumbbell row supported on a bench tends to be a safer alternative. Exercise number 4, bench press. Few exercises are as popular as the bench press, and few are also as poorly executed. The movement primarily recruits the pectoralis major, the triceps, and the anterior deltoid. But what many people do not know is that the pectoralis also participates in internal rotation and shoulder flexion, in addition to horizontal arm adduction. That explains why scapular retraction before each repetition is so important. It protects the shoulder joint and creates a stable base for pressing more weight safely. To perform it correctly, lie on the bench with your feet flat on the floor. Retract your shoulder blades against the bench before unracking the bar. Lower the bar until it gently touches your chest and press it back up to full elbow extension. An extra tip that prevents shoulder pain is to keep your wrists aligned directly above your elbows throughout the entire bar path. I will admit it took me years to understand that lowering the bar too fast and letting it bounce off your chest is not strength, it is poor execution in disguise. That is one of the most common mistakes, along with excessively arching the lower back and neglecting scapular retraction at the start of the movement. 3 sets of 6 to 8 repetitions are recommended, prioritizing control during the eccentric phase, which accounts for a significant portion of the hypertrophy stimulus generated by the exercise. Contraindications include active shoulder injuries, rotator cuff tendinitis, and persistent elbow joint pain, cases where the pec deck machine or a bench press with a reduced range of motion may be safer alternatives. Exercise number 5, deadlift. If there is one exercise capable of recruiting practically the entire body in a single movement, that exercise is the deadlift. The gluteus maximus, hamstrings, spinal erectors, trapezius, and forearms all work together in a complete posterior chain. And it is precisely this characteristic of mobilizing a large muscle mass simultaneously that matters for the hormonal response. A review published in Sportomedicine by Kramer and Radames in 2005 compiled decades of research and concluded that moderate to high-intensity training with short rest intervals, recruiting large muscle groups through multi-joint exercises like the deadlift, tends to produce the greatest acute elevations in testosterone and growth hormone compared to low-volume exercises targeting isolated muscles. To perform it correctly, position your feet at hip width. Bring the bar close to your shins. Push your hips back while keeping your spine neutral, and lift by extending your hips and knees simultaneously until you are standing upright with your glutes squeezed. The tip that helps most is to think about pushing the floor away with your feet rather than pulling the bar with your arms, which protects the lower back. What many people do not know is that the hamstrings are a muscle group frequently neglected compared to the quadriceps, and that imbalance contributes to knee injuries over the years. The deadlift corrects this disproportion because it works both hip extension and knee stabilization in an integrated way. The most serious mistakes are rounding the lower back during the lift and letting the bar drift away from the body, which increases the load on the spine. Excessively hyperextending the hips at the top should also be avoided. 3 sets of 6 to 8 repetitions are recommended, with total focus on flawless execution before progressing in load. Contraindications include lumbar disc herniation, acute lower back injuries, and uncontrolled blood pressure, since the isometric effort generated by the movement is considerable. Exercise number 6, pull-up. The pull-up is one of those exercises that separates those who really train their back from those who only pretend to. The movement intensely recruits the latissimus dorsi, the rhomboids, the biceps as a synergist, and the forearms, which work isometrically supporting your body weight from the start to the finish of every repetition. To perform it correctly, use a pronated grip with your hands slightly wider than shoulder width. Pull your body up until your chin clears the bar, and lower in a controlled manner until your arms are fully extended, without losing tension at the bottom. Remember that the eccentric phase, the controlled descent, accounts for a significant portion of the muscle growth stimulus, so there is no point in simply dropping between repetitions. An extra tip for those who cannot yet complete unassisted repetitions is to use a resistance band under your knees or feet, or an assisted machine, always prioritizing correct execution rather than forcing incomplete repetitions. Common mistakes include swinging the body to generate momentum, incomplete range of motion by not lowering all the way, and neglecting scapular activation before initiating the pull. 3 sets of 6 to 8 repetitions are recommended, and assistance may be used when necessary to maintain movement quality. Contraindications include active shoulder injuries, elbow epicondylitis, and untreated wrist injuries, cases where the lat pull-down on a cable machine tends to be a safer alternative while the injury is recovering. Exercise number 7, squat. We have arrived at the exercise that sparks the most debate in any training circle, and for good reason. The squat is, according to much of the available scientific literature, one of the movements that provokes the greatest acute hormonal response among resistance exercises ever studied. A study conducted by Kramer and colleagues, published in 1998, observed 8 healthy men performing 4 sets of 10 repetitions of the barbell squat at approximately 70% of 1 repetition maximum, with 90 seconds of rest between sets. The researchers collected blood samples before and after the exercise, and found that total testosterone rose from a baseline value of 15 nanomoles per liter to 22 nanomoles per liter immediately after the effort, remaining elevated at all measured time points up to 30 minutes afterward. Another study comparing the barbell squat with the leg extension found greater increases in testosterone, cortisol, and growth hormone following the free weight squat. The main muscle groups recruited are the quadriceps, the gluteus maximus, the hamstrings, and the core, which works to stabilize the torso throughout the entire range of motion. To perform it correctly, position your feet at shoulder width, push your hips back while simultaneously flexing your knees. Descend to at least parallel to the floor while keeping your spine neutral, and drive back up by pushing the floor forcefully. An extra tip that makes a real difference is keeping your weight distributed through the middle of your foot, preventing your heels from rising, or your weight from shifting onto your toes. The most common mistakes are the knees caving inward on the descent, known as dynamic valgus, lower back rounding, and insufficient depth, which reduces the muscle stimulus generated. 3 sets of 8 to 12 repetitions are recommended. Contraindications include acute knee injuries, symptomatic lumbar disc herniation, and severe hip joint problems. Cases where the Smith machine squat or a supervised partial range of motion squat may be safer alternatives to maintain the stimulus without compromising the joint. Now that you know the 7 main exercises, check out the bonus movement that closes this routine with power. Bonus exercise: box jump. Unlike the previous movements, the box jump is a plyometric exercise, meaning it depends on the body's ability to generate explosive force in a very short amount of time. This characteristic intensely recruits fast twitch muscle fibers, which tend to be less stimulated in traditional training, done only with heavy loads and slow movements. The main muscle groups involved are the quadriceps, the gluteus maximus, and the calves, which deserve special attention in this age group. The calves are considered by many physiologists to be the second heart of the body, since they help pump blood back up against the force of gravity, and they also play a central role in balance and fall prevention. To perform it correctly, dip slightly to generate momentum, jump with both feet at the same time onto a stable platform, landing softly with your knees bent to absorb the impact. Then step down from the box rather than jumping back down, which reduces the accumulated joint stress with each repetition. An important extra tip for this age group is to choose a height that allows for a controlled and safe landing, without extreme effort just to complete the jump. There is no merit in choosing a higher platform simply to look more impressive on social media. The most common mistakes include landing with locked knees instead of bent ones, choosing heights that are too extreme for your current training level, and jumping back down to the ground instead of stepping down, which increases unnecessary joint wear. 3 sets of 6 to 8 repetitions are recommended, with a longer rest period between sets than usual, since the quality of the explosive effort matters far more than the number of accumulated repetitions. Contraindications include active joint injuries in the knee or ankle, balance problems, advanced osteoporosis, and uncontrolled cardiovascular conditions. Since this is a high-intensity explosive exercise that demands good impact absorption capacity. And remember, leg training is one of the most important for hormonal response. So if you also want to see an intense leg workout for those who are already past 40 using only dumbbells, we have a video appearing right now on the screen showing each exercise in greater detail. It is based on science with the body's conditions at this age as the main guidelines, so make sure you check it out. Thank you for watching all the way through, and may God bless you, my friend.